Dork back again, my friends, and today, as always, I am coming at you live from my always sunny Data Cathedral Studios here in Gainesville, Georgia. I'm bringing you DorkCast episode 43, and today's title is, what did my generative AI come up with? Amplifying your customer's voice. My guest today is Kim Larson. She's the Vice President of Insights. I know that y'all are multitasking, trying to eat and watch this too. Feel free to grab this information, reach out to Kim in an email, reach out to her on LinkedIn, or holy cow, she must be a real data kind of person. She's actually got a GitHub page, which is pretty awesome. The company she's working at is called Luminoso, and I wanted to share that page for you because, again, you might want to go check this out. And you could just go to their basic luminoso.com landing page, but that is not why you're here. I know you want to go to their slash nerd homepage because that makes a whole lot more sense to me. All right. So for some reason, Kim, my generative AI assistant that I use to create my titles came up with amplifying your customer's voice. So I totally expect that you and Luminoso must generate megaphones or something and then sell them to people to help amplify their customers' voices.
Yes, yeah. We definitely do that, but more of a digital amplifier. We what
So
we do
like a setting I'd put on my wave files and things that raises decibels.
is yes, but if you need that in a dashboard decibels kind of way.
Ooh,
Uh,
that's an interesting decibels in my dashboard. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so often the open source text analytics, the reviews, etc., they may be shown in a dashboard with anecdotal, this is a comment, right? Or maybe you have a basic text analytics platform that's giving you a word cloud with frequent words in big font and less common words in small font.
Okay.
But what we try to do is we try to capture the entire story, that natural language understanding model, and put it in front of folks where you can see the themes around value, the themes around flavor, the themes around service and delivery in ways that are kind of unique in the CX text analytics space.
So let's get into that in a second because I get like on my YouTube channel, I get like maybe 4 or 5 comments a month. And I could look at those on my screen. There's probably customers or organizations that have more than 4 or 5 comments a month, right? What types of volumes of these comments and surveys are you usually dealing with your customer base?
It's a wide range. It's a wide range, and it really relies on the richness and the vocabulary of a given data set. So the rule of thumb I tend to use is this data set longer than my attention span? And
Okay.
my attention span is a 2026 attention span. So I can scroll through hundreds,
You can scroll through my 4 or 5 comments.
I could do it. I could do it. I could scroll through a few hundred short comments,
Okay.
um, or I can, and that I'm not going to automate to a robot, right?
Right.
But if you have 5,000 essays where people are pouring out their journals onto the internet on Reddit in a product review of, I bought the thing and it changed my life, but the flavor was off, those stories that exceed my attention span, that's what I pull into daylight. Sometimes that can make a really good project with just a few dozen or a few hundred really rich essays. Or if you have tens of thousands of shorter comments, that works too. But we really differentiate ourselves when you have masses of amounts of those big essays. Um,
That makes a lot of sense. So they could use a tool like you that's a digital dashboard decibel adjuster, or they could hire an army of people who all think exactly the same. And they could say, I read 100, and here's what I think the main heart of the context was. And the other person could say, well, I read this other 100, and this is what I think.
It's
And since they're all thinking exactly the same, they come up with a consensus then,
and it's
or they use a tool like yours.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the tool like ours comes in the more you understand how people read things. There's been, case studies on how a judge will rule on a given court case depending on if it's before or after lunch, being a stronger predictor than the evidence in the case itself or any other variable.
Wow.
Humans are really susceptible to being human. One of
Okay.
the benefits of introducing a robot into the workflow is it is historically very reliable. I say historically because now we have some hallucinatory robots that have entered the business ecosystem, and it is uh, those are really good at generating stories from stories, but they're not necessarily reliable and predictable. If you upload something one day and do it again the next day, those will look different, even if it's the same data set. Luminoso, our platform is reliable. It will produce the same associations between words every time, and it is a debiased engine, which means we've gone through intentional efforts to remove the gender bias from our underlying model or racial biases from our underlying model and really letting the data speak for itself on what is associated with service, what is associated with efficiency, and that kind of thing.
I've heard, this is crazy. I have heard that predictability and explainability in AI is really the thing that people care about.
Because it matters.
Suddenly.
It matters a lot.
Now, 5 years ago, it was just magic and they just wanted magic. But now they understand. So you're not using just some random large language model under the covers. You guys have data, like real data science stuff that's backed by math that's been around for thousands of years, right?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, our company was spun out of the MIT Media Lab as a project to see could computers understand language the way humans do.
Hmm.
So that when you think about how humans learn, we learn what words mean frequently, or at least the first time, generally through immersion, right? If I use this word in this context, this result comes.
Yep.
And our model learns kind of similarly. There's the baseline understanding of wet dogs stink. Water is found at the beach. The relationship between words are preemptively mapped. And then we have and you really did tempt me into the DorkCast side of things with the getting into the transfer learning, machine learning model that's in between. And that's learning from the data. So that was helpful in situations like in March of 2020, a lot of novel language terms were introduced and they were regionally, culturally specific.
Hmm.
Who was referring to it as the current situation versus pandemic versus a whole slew of other words, and what words were related to what. That was very culturally dependent. We all log on to the internet, and increasingly we see emojis flipping into everything. What is associated with rocket emoji? What is associated with thumbs up emoji or heart emoji or cursing face emoji? If we track those relationships to our engine, those are just another word with ambiguous context. We're not
Right.
assigning what those mean. And that's really helpful when you're studying, depending on your domain, is the splash emoji for hydrated hair because you're studying conditioner, or does it mean
Hmm.
something else? The leaf emoji, is it because you're a gardener, or does it mean something else? Our platform understands that based on how people are using it.
So let me ask you this, because this is a real world case that just came up.
Yeah.
I talked to my good buddy Claude the other day,
Oh,
and
okay.
I said, Claude, help me write a really nice YouTube description, because I'm great at sharing 1 million words in a video, trying to encapsulate that into 50 for a description that people could read and keep their attention.
Hmm.
Not so easy. It comes up with this phrase, the real T, colon, and then has a thing. I
Okay.
had no idea what it was,
Uh-huh.
right? And I'm like, all right, I happen to be working on a video on metacognitive analytics, and I explain to people, when you see something you think is wrong, you need to ask yourself, what context does the LLM see that you might be missing? So rather than saying, "Are you a knucklehead?" I would never use the phrase "the real tea." I wasn't talking about beverages at all.
Mhm.
It came back and told me that that's kind of what millennials use and Gen Zs use these days, talking about here's the main point, right? Like an old guy would, like me, would say, here's the main point, bottom line is, and that's their bottom line. How do you guys track things like that and keep that in context? That if you get a comment from me about tea, it's going to mean what you just held up
Uh-huh.
versus maybe there's other
The,
words
the
in
gossip kind
line,
of tea.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it depends on it depends on the context. So our engine will look for terms that are surrounding it. So if it
Okay.
is around, let me tell you about our CEO and my coworker and the conversation I had with HR, that is probably not going to be the beverage context. But
Okay.
if I'm pulling in business reviews
Yep.
and and it's being paired with croissants and it's being paired with cafe,
Mhm.
it's going to understand the difference between the
Okay.
two.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I keep pretending as though I don't really understand what we're doing here. All right. I'm just playing with you. I didn't just randomly meet Kim online and we decided to start talking about amplifying customers' voices. Qlik is actually partnered with Luminoso to help amplify the voices digitally on a dashboard. I'm loving that. I'm going to be going with that phrase from now on. I'll probably get a raise. If you're watching this, Sean, I need a raise because I made that term up, not Kim.
No, yeah, no.
If you're a clicky, you understand how we do dashboarding. And in this particular case, I'm looking at my analytics and orders to cash information, all four data marts coming out of SAP with my data for my giant conglomerate fictitious ale company, Kim. It's amazing. The money, the fake money's just flying by. What I want you to see is this number here, the 20.24, and I'm going to write that down. That is our weighted days sales outstanding calculation. So basically, on average, we're looking at 20.24 days to get our money once we've shipped truckloads of beer, cases of beer, kegs, all that kind of stuff that you can assume that our analytics and ale company's doing. That's with no filtering. That's globally for our organization across all of our divisions, all of our beer types. Now, what we've got here is we've actually taken the survey comments again from my totally fictitious ale company and we've passed them into Luminoso. And I get to see which concepts are most prevalent and I get to see exact matches and conceptual matches. Now, what does that even mean, Kim?
Yeah, so exact matches are the term with stems accommodated for.
So, like
So
aroma.
aroma, when they use the word aroma, that's the
Okay.
word that they used. I think some ex other examples would be like, let's see, I see, uh,
So there's nose and flavor and
there's
hop.
nose and flavor, and sometimes there's a word like people versus person.
Okay.
Those are the same entity. Those will be aligned under exact matches.
Okay.
And then consent, so you don't have to pre-code that. There's some people that I'd recognize learn the hard way. They've done the Python coding, and they're accommodating for every single spelling error and conjugation of old, oldest, older, all of it. We cover that under exact matches.
Okay.
And then conceptual matches are we get a little bit fancier. So that is the term, those are the terms that are synonymously or in conjunction with each other.
All
They're
right.
recognize the patterns there because there's a lot of ways to say great, there's a lot of ways to say amazing. Those are going to be conceptual matches, but sometimes there's not a lot of variation.
Okay.
When you're pouring something, the word is pours. There's not a lot happening around it, which is why we don't see conceptual matches for pours.
So if
Terms
I
like
used a phrase like I tilted my bottle upside down and gravity took it into the glass,
that's hard, that's not a concept anymore.
ah, it
That
wouldn't
is
use that as pores. Okay, I was trying.
Yeah, no, you were trying. But example, sweetness may
Yep.
be described as chocolatey, citrusy. Uh, there's a lot of ways that people can describe sweetness.
That makes
And
sense.
so our engine brings that forward of, yeah, you can track that individually, but there's a lot of words
And
and the
what's
more
interesting here is that they're obviously trying to tell me that it's sweetness more often than they actually use the word sweetness.
exactly, exactly.
Okay. Now, this was another thing here. I've got these things that are concepts, and then I've got these cluster concepts and cluster labels. And it looks really pretty on my screen, but
It's
I,
nice.
I'm just a click dork. I've got no idea what these things mean.
Yeah, so the clusters of concepts is the extrapolation of those conceptual matches where we're looking at the relationship between words.
Okay.
So, so when we're looking at pores, it's going to be pretty, it's going to be a pretty small cluster. When they pour, they may talk about the foam, the color, there's the
Okay.
action, and then the visual. But when we get to like the sweetness section, and we were talking about citrusy and chocolatey, we may
Yep.
start to see a fuller cluster of these terms used together.
Okay.
And that's how we develop these themes and sections. So to help you kind of figure out the patterns.
Okay. Now, if I were to look at this data,
Mhm.
and I love me a sand key, I'm not going to lie to you. That
Yeah.
I've gone on record on LinkedIn and Twitter and everybody else that are hearing me, and sand key is one of my favorites. Years ago, it was by far my favorite because I love the way it shows you the relationship between dimensions.
Hmm.
I could see a million bar charts on the screen. My human mind can't bring the relationship together, but a sand key can. So if I look at this, I'm going to think that from all of my comments, the number one clustered label is nose. Am I looking at this data correctly?
Um, so, let me see if I can make my screen better. So you said, repeat that part with the nose
So,
to,
so the way that this looks to me is I have more comments that roll up to nose than any of my other cluster labels.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So, and that would be that is due to the nature of the beer consumption experience, right? When you look at it, there's a limited range of colors and descriptions for what you see in the
Yep.
glass. But when you're looking at, I think you have 50,000 beer reviews in here, there's a
A lot
lot of
more than
flavors.
YouTube, a lot more than my YouTube comments, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So there's going to be all your stout flavors with chocolatey and coffee, and all your IPA flavors with hoppy and citrusy and grapefruit, and maybe there's some bad beers. I recall I think there's a Band-Aid. Someone referenced smelling Band-Aid in their beer, like that rubbery. They're like, it wasn't good.
That was one of my competitors. That didn't come from
Yeah,
analytics and
it's good to do
I
a proper
guarantee it.
SWOT review to see what someone else is doing poorly.
Yeah.
But there's a lot in that aroma, smell, palette that
Yep.
is going to come through.
Nice. And so what I'm able to do in Qlik and with the sand key is I filter now to the nose because that was where the majority of my comments were coming, right? Does that make sense? Now, what I'm able to do is you guys can return sentiments
Yeah.
as one of the things. It's not the most important to me, but you do return the sentiment. And so I see that I've got multiple concepts that feed into nose. And I was able to see that for these concepts, there's a variety here of negative sentiment and positive sentiment. So when they talked about hint or nose, it was majority seen positive. For bitterness, it was a majority negative, and for bitter, it was even worse.
Mm,
And so is that kind of the guideline there that, hey, let's find out when people are saying those, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing?
yeah.
Am I kind of interpreting that correctly?
Yeah. Daylight uses concept level sentiment and it learns from the context of the data whether the things are positive or negative.
Okay.
Sometimes ripped jeans are cool, sometimes they're not.
Not cool.
More common, we'll see people using sentiment to evaluate customer support experience, right?
Okay.
You reach out, you have an issue, You talk to customer support, your NPS, your CSAT score, your effort score, they're all going to tank, right?
Hmm.
But there are some companies that when you reach out to support, they fix your issue. Nancy was super kind and accommodating and fixed my issue right away.
Okay.
There's other support experiences where maybe you're put on hold for 5 hours and then they hang up on you before you go through the robot tree. That's a negative experience with negative sentiment.
Yep.
So this tracks that.
And so what I always want to do is I want to get to the heart of the matter. So I'm going to select bitter here.
Hmm.
And this is called a distribution plot. So I've had 21,000 or yeah, 21,640 comments that are about bitter. And I'm able to see all of that sentiment. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to say, hey, I really only want to focus on the worst of the worst, right? So I was able to have you take my 50,000 comments, roll those things into some terms for me, these concepts and clusters. And now I'm down to, I need to see the 50,000 or the now 21,000 that were really negative. And the great thing, obviously, with Qlik is I can look at every single row. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna stop reading at five. You're free to read to 100. I don't know who's gonna read to 21,000, but
And do it reliably. We talked
but
about the judge. You may read it one
yeah,
way in the
yeah,
morning and another way at 11:58 when you're ready for lunch.
yep. And the neat thing is, you not only do you return the data to us, like here's the text, you let me know here's where the term starts and ends. Right. So I always talk about explainability. And if it's not, if there's no explainability, it's just data. It's not data science. So I
Mm.
really appreciate that. But here's the point I want to make for everybody at home. I'm not trying to sell you on a demo of ClickSense. If you'll recall, my overall corporate days sales outstanding, that is how we turn money around, and that is important to us. That is the driver of our organization. That number was 20.24, but Kim, I'm going to need you to do me a favor. You need to tell those people to stop talking negatively because those people that talk most negatively about us and our bitter beer, they don't pay on average for 37.76 days.
Mm.
My fictitious beer company has got a trouble. We got to pay a mortgage at the end of the month, and that turnaround time doesn't get me cash until next month. Are you seeing this with a lot of your organizations that what they're trying to do, they're not just looking at pretty pictures, they're trying to tie those voices into here's the bottom line. You don't care about Sally Sue that wrote one comment.
Hmm.
Do you care that the people that are writing these comments are impacting your business? And I'm imagining you see that a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and we see it across a variety of domains, right? So Luminoso is a domain agnostic text analytics company, which means we don't necessarily care what it is you're studying. We care that there's stories being told and that they're being acted upon. So you may have this application for
Mhm.
product reviews, but we also see it with employee managers who are looking for churn rates, promotion rates, productivity rates. We see it in market research groups that are trying to figure out, does it make sense to enter this market? Do we have a pet food that is vet approved, veterinary approved, or is it chef made? Because if your cat doesn't like your food, your cat doesn't like you. Or does it
Mhm.
matter that it's coming from the farm and that the cows are treated well before they become dog food? The branding of that matters, resonation matters, everything should be actionable. If people are taking the effort to tell their experience, there's usually a reason why they're doing it, and there's usually a way to figure out how to make their experience better and benefit from doing the right thing.
Now, folks, I need you to write that word she just said down, actionable. Keep that in mind when we get to the end and I show you one more slide. Because Kim and I think an awful lot alike. what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and clear these selections. I think everybody probably gets this. This is one of the things that I thought was really neat. So when we began this partnership with Luminoso, the partner manager there showed me this thing, and they called this a galaxy chart because I thought it was just a word cloud. That is not just a word cloud, is it, Kim?
No, I do tend to preface if people have an allergy to word clouds, particularly folks who've worked in CX and done text analytics previously, they tend to have the strongest allergy. The young interns, they tend to be more open to it, and then the data scientists who understand vectors and word to vec and the multidimensionality of language,
Mm-hmm.
they fish to water with this environment. So what this is a vector projection of the model underneath the hood. Most
That
texting,
sounds really that sounds really complicated. I'm just a simple old man, Kim.
yeah, yeah. No, I think
Vector
people,
projection. What do you mean by
yeah,
that?
yeah. So most text analytics platforms will give you the direct answer, but we talked about transparency and
Yep.
predictability.
Mm-hmm.
This is Luminoso's that on a platter. So this isn't for everyone. Some people don't need it. If you just want the quick insights, we have options. Dalton, your dashboard did a phenomenal job giving those easy insights. But for the folks who really want to dig in more and figure out what is we talked about conceptual matches, what's being used in relation to what? We talked about themes, what's related to bitterness. This gives us the view of what is related to what, how closely, and
But
diving
when
in.
you're saying related and how closely, I think that's one of the things I want you to help understand because I could touch this if you want me to.
Yeah, let's see what happens when you touch it.
So I'm going to take this word creamy,
Mm-hmm.
and as I touch that word, let me do this again. I'm going to touch that word creamy,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden there's some words that are in dark blue, some words that are in aqua, and some words that are in gray.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? They start with letters that are close to the word blue.
No, that would be one way to do it, but this is looking for the strength of the relationship between that word and the other words. The tighter the relationship, if you can imagine tiny rubber bands
Okay.
between the word creamy or the word pores, since we talked about that one earlier.
Yep.
If you click on any of these words, there's some things that have a really thick, tight, short rubber band.
Okay.
Those are going to follow it as you pull this concept around.
And what color would, right now, what color are those? Are those the
Those would be
grays?
dark blue. Those
That'd
would
be
be
the dark blue. So the
the dark
sticky,
blue.
the smooth, the thick. So you're
Hmm.
saying if I drag this to another part of my screen, holy cow, that thick and smooth is kind of coming with it.
Yeah, yeah, those words are being
And,
used.
and the light grays are just going way to the opposite end of it, and the
Yeah,
greens are kind of going in the middle.
yeah. So the gray words are used in a different part of the comment, or they're not being used in the same comments at all.
Okay.
So those are on.
So when you said a relationship, you mean it. Like
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
the same word. They're not synonyms for each other, but there's a close link when those things are used or the fact that they've been used together in somebody's comments. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, yeah. And on the other side, there I mentioned the rubber bands.
Yep.
We have those really skinny, long, loose rubber bands.
Yep.
Sometimes there are, let's say there's a mix, let's say a few reviews in Arabic came in, or a few reviews in Japanese came in. Those have no rubber bands to the word pores. Those would have no rubber bands to the word
Okay.
creamy. Yeah.
Gotcha. And so the different colors now are it's just random colors from Qlik, right?
The colors here are representative of the themes. Uh,
Okay.
so when we talked about sweetness, those are all kind of clustered around that nose, taste,
Mm-hmm.
fruit. But there's going to be different like state lines because
Okay.
the sweetness of a stout is going to have a different relationship than the sweetness of a citrus, but they're all in this continent
Okay.
of, of taste.
So
Uh,
it's orange. So does that mean it's kind of related to these ones that were orange before I hover over it?
yeah, so orange is all, I think that's ABV and
Yep.
drinkability and smooth and
Yeah.
carbonation. Yep, those are
That's a
all.
pretty good guess from just seeing orange.
If you were to reset the view to the default configuration, they would have the proximity would have it be a little bit more intuitive. That's one of the
Okay.
things that kind of brings all the different continents together.
Well, one of the things that I know everybody at home watching, they love the fact that you can filter things and everything's responsive. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look for, man, you know what I care about those words? I only want the ones that had low taste.
Hmm.
And now I've actually passed my filters to your galaxy chart and we weeded out all the other nonsense from it. I'm only looking at 60,000 terms this time. There's 1,000 documents that had low taste as a score number.
Hmm.
There was a field value. If I wanted to say low taste might actually be 2.5 as well, I can go ahead and enhance that filter where these buttons are simply, hey, low taste probably means these things. No, I want a high aroma instead. And
Hmm.
so we can have these buttons, and we're actually interacting with your galaxy chart for people. So they can look at, hey, where's the things we care about? Because sometimes it might be good, right? I want to pat people on the back. These are the words we're looking for. If we're getting high overall scores, high appearance scores, high aroma scores, high palate scores, high taste scores on our completely fictitious beers, I'm going to want to use some of these words in my marketing, aren't I?
Yeah, if they're relevant and if they're resonating. One of the things we talked about Goodhart's law earlier.
Hmm.
With as soon as you measure it, it stops being a good example of because it's no longer aligned.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we're not if we start to poison our data, right?
Okay.
We found out that smoky was super popular, so we put it into our stout text. We may poison it. So we should be careful
Gotcha.
and respect the data, but it is a good thing to learn from, and maybe we need to find out why is smoky a good thing? When is it a good thing? Because maybe sometimes it's good, maybe it's bad. Maybe not everyone's into hoppy flavors. Personally, if there's a hoppy thing in my berry flavored beverage, you just ruined it, and then I'm going to tank the hoppy scores.
Nice. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now.
Yeah.
And you brought up a great point. I would have just plugged your stuff in. I would have ran right off and shot myself in the foot. When somebody is looking to use your product, you're not just selling the solution. You're going to help them understand the things that just went right over my head as I was like, oh man, I think I'm going down this road. And you're like, whoa, 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 let's back you up and protect you. So you're actually going to work with customers and try to help them protect themselves, right?
Yeah, it's important to work with thoughtful analysts. Helpful to work with thoughtful data scientists, one that think with the context in mind. Um, because I think you'd really hate to invest in a platform or invest in a solution that promises all these things with a lot of contingencies as an assumption.
Yep.
One of the things I look for when I look for folks to join our team is I'm looking for folks who question and add friction in productive, constructive ways.
Hmm.
I think the folks who we're seeing this more and more with generative AI solutions is they tend to be very appeasing.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of offerings for temptation and easy answers. And those aren't always going to be what serve you in the long run. The
Right.
goal is to solve customer problems, solve employee problems, and develop a long-term symbiotic relationship between the solution and the folks who need that solution. Uh,
Nice.
so that's something that we're always looking for.
That's very nice. Well, I want to share one last screen before we go. So I'm going to share my screen again. I came up with this phenomenal quote. You're free to screenshot it if you need to, Kim. You could use this in your marketing literature. AI isn't just about automation and speed. It's a time travel device that compresses experience into action before history repeats itself.
That's it's
Does
very
that pretty
timely.
much tie things together?
Yeah, it's very timely for what we're seeing this year. If you're not studying your historical data, if you're not studying the history of what's going on and what's been tracked before, history rhymes. And I think it's really good to be doing your research, and it's increasingly difficult to get high quality insights because there's a lot of noise being piped out there and a lot of isolating algorithms, and sometimes it's good to get out there.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm always humored by is we want to do sentiment analysis. I'm like, but why?
Yeah,
Like if with what we just showed, right? That is a completely different story than if our KPI was that we're hoping that our sentiment on comments is 0.635 positive, and all these reviews came back and said it's 0.64 positive. We get our quarterly bonuses and we're done,
yeah,
right? And that's what I mean by, hey, that sentiment analysis can automate history and you could show that on a KPI. But in order to take action, you better understand what was going on behind the sentiment. The sentiment itself is a historical metric. It is the voice of the customer at a 0 decibel increase, right? And what you guys do with rolling those things together and helping people analyze what's the closeness of these things, you're really moving them into the future because they're going to actually be able to act on it and improve,
yeah. That's the
right?
goal. That's the goal.
And I like that smile because that's why you guys are our partner. I love working with people that are thinking, let's take action. Let's not just show a number on a screen. So, Kim, any last words you want to leave us with before we sign off?
I think less of a direction and more of a question as folks try to figure out what they're going to do next is evaluate what your customers are saying. Where are you listening?
Okay.
One of the things that I've noticed this year is um, the there are heightened stakes in what people are saying, and so people have been rerouting where they're having these conversations. So trying to understand what are people saying, how are you responding? Because if people feel like they're saying things where they're not being listened to, they're going to stop saying stuff.
Hmm.
So if you're not valuing what your employees are saying, you're not valuing what your customers are saying. Um, you may be losing your canaries, and you want
Yeah.
to keep the canaries.
No, we don't want any dead canaries. And you brought up a good point there. I kept talking about customer voices. This is really employee voices as well as partner voices.
Yes.
So this is a pretty thorough system. Well, everyone, I appreciate your time today. I hope you got something out of this. And as always, I sure hope that you have a great day.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Dalton.